Welcome to the Wilson Wealth Show, a thought provoking show about building wealth in the new economy. Each week, members of the Wilson Wealth team and their guests will discuss how to navigate the world of personal finance, stocks, real estate, and entrepreneurship to help you build wealth in the new economy. And now, here is your host, Ciera McCosh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wilson Wealth Show. I'm your host, Ciera, and today I have Maurice with me. How you doing, Maurice?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Always good to hear you're doing good. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. This month, we're doing a series on alternative homes for millennials and Gen Z. Unfortunately, with the economy being the way that it is, many millennials and older Gen Z cannot afford to purchase traditional homes on the traditional market. So today we're going to talk about one of the options that's been popularized by millennials over the last few years and has proven itself to be a viable option for those who want to be homeowners but just can't afford it. And that is tiny houses. I'm sure everyone listening has at one point heard of the tiny home movement. This movement was started a few years ago and has become so popularized that it's easier than ever to either find or build your very own tiny home. We've hit the point where it's become so normalized that it's actually a realistic option for future homeowners.
I've heard of these tiny homes, but I thought it was just a fad that was going to die out. In fact, I thought it was just something that the minimalists were doing to kind of save money and retire early, the whole fire movement. So I didn't know it was becoming sustainable now.
Yeah. At first, it kind of was a fad. Like, I feel like a lot of people made fun of it. But because so many people started building their own, and more importantly, they actually lasted in them, a lot of building companies kind of jumped on that bandwagon and they've started building tiny homes that range from like $8,000 all the way up to $150,000. So it kind of depends on what frills you include in it, but the average cost is about $30,000 to $60,000.
Man, that's a lot cheaper and more expensive than I thought it would be. So I guess I always thought it was something, that didn't really go over 50,000. So that's surprising.
Yeah, you feel like it would be something that'd be like, I don't know, like $20,000, but yeah, they can get all the way up to 150 depending on what you have in it. But I mean, that's like a fat tiny house. Like not everybody's going all the way out. A lot of building companies just like put everything in it expensive that you could possibly need. Like nobody needs like a pasta maker in their tiny home. But but yeah, that's the thing though. I'm only giving out the prices for official tiny homes made by the building companies though.
Hmm.
However, you could save a considerable amount of money by building it yourself if you're handy or you know people who are. And you can find materials in bulk through like warehouses. For example, my father and stepmother actually live in a tiny home that they built themselves on family property for literally next to nothing. Considering they didn't even have to pay for the land, and my father and my grandfather just built it, and it only took them like a couple months.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because that's really like the old school way. You think of shows like Little House on the Prairie. You'd have multiple generations living on one piece of land. And it's something that I always thought, well, at some point in the future, it made a lot more sense than going into a nursing home, like buying a big piece of land, building the facilities that different generations of the family need. So I'm glad to see that that's kind of coming back. I think that's going to gain traction. You're kind of like creating your own community.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. The land has actually been in my stepmom's family for some time now, and there's quite a few houses on it. Most actually do belong to family members, but some of them they did like rent out to other families just because they didn't really need the house. So it is a good option for those who want to stay close to home. I understand that that's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you
Mhm.
do want to be close to your parents, your grandparents, having a big plot of land and just building your own little tiny home on it is a really, really great option, especially for someone who's in like their 20s, who needs like the mobility of it. Another interesting option I've seen people doing is they will buy, this is really cool. I've seen a few videos on it, but they will buy these enormous sheds from Lowe's or Home Depot. They cost like $10,000 and they put up walls, plumbing, they make it really, really nice, turn it into a tiny home, and it's only $200 a month. Like, how is insane is that?
Wow, $200 a month. That doesn't even sound legal.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It's funny. Funny you should say that. Funny you should say that because tiny homes are not actually totally legal in every state, if you can believe that. It's more about different states have different zoning regulations, so it can get kind of tricky. But states like Texas, North Carolina, California, Colorado, and Oregon are super tiny home friendly, and they have lots and lots of communities that you can live in long term or move around from community to community depending on what you want to do.
there is a movie that's out right now, called, I think, Nomad Land, where this lady, I don't know if she's tied to Wall Street, but she loses everything in the last recession, and she just goes around out in the American West and just moves around. So, is that what you mean by move around?
Yeah, yeah. You can do the exact same thing. Like, that's an actual perfect segue. Thank you. Best part about owning a tiny home is it can be completely mobile if you want it to. This depends on how they're built. Most of the ones that are sold by builders are completely mobile, and you can travel like from community to community in some states and areas. And you can even like park it in like a scenic spot and enjoy the view, kind of like you would like an RV, but it's your actual house and it's like decked out and super nice. And I think that's the absolute coolest part of it.
I would have really liked this when I was, really young and wanted to travel, particularly when I didn't want to go right to college or immediately after college, either period. It's a way to travel and not get worried about, hey, where am I gonna, drop roots? You can just see the country, see people, and get these great experiences. And if this was around when I was that age, I'd definitely take advantage of it. I'm sure there are communities that have sprung up around it. There's a movie about it in some ways, so this is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think it's a really good option for people who are either younger or retired,
Mm.
who just really want to travel around in their actual home. But you don't have to move around. If you don't want to move around, you can just put it on a plot of land. I actually really want one. I personally have wanted one for a while now. But you also kind of have to consider that you are downsizing if you're not used to something like that.
Right, right, right. And I'm not a big proponent of the downsizing. So that's one thing that does scare me. Like I said earlier, I just associated this with like the minimalistic movement, people who are
Hmm.
trying to like save money. I don't think people downsize unless they have to downsize. So a voluntary downsize probably wouldn't be for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you kind of have to remember you are living a little bit more minimalistically. It is a little bit of a downsize depending on what you get. They can be really small. They can be smaller than a studio apartment, or
Mm,
they can be about the size of a one-bedroom apartment. It kind of just depends on what you get. But because they've become so popular, there are so many different kinds that you can get. It's not like a one size fits all kind of deal like it was when it was first coming out and you're kind of seeing the same house over and over again, you know?
mm.
So you just need to make sure that you do your research and see what works for you. Like, pretty much all the building companies make them now. I mean, I've seen them just like on the side of the road, just like driving through a city, just like, it's kind of similar to how like mobile homes were done like back in the day. Like, I
Right,
mean, mobile homes are still done, but like
right.
around the time when mobile homes became like really popular and it was like a very viable option for people because the economy was down, it's kind of the same thing. It's history is repeating itself. We're having the same thing happen again, only we're making it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, I suppose.
Right.
And we're giving it like the bells and whistles and making it so that there's no um what's a good way to say this? Like, there's no
Stigma.
stigma. That exactly. That's the word I was looking for. It's taking away the stigma because I think it's a really, really great option for people. But I feel like people like really looked down on it back in the day, and they were just like, oh, well, that's not a good option. You don't want to do that. But now people are like, yeah, it's a great option. I do want to do that. I'm going to travel around in my tiny house
Oh,
and have
definitely.
a great time.
Definitely. Well, I think that you've got a lot of financial forces that are making this in vogue. I recently heard where existing homes, homes that aren't new, are costing more than new homes.
Yeah.
And that's just due to the lack of inventory of new homes. And so, um, I just think if I were starting out, this would appeal to me. And this actually happened to my parents. They never gave the reason, but they lived in I guess, a mobile home on my grandparents' yard
Hmm.
until they bought their first home. They did a couple of things. They deferred, I think, a honeymoon, an immediate honeymoon, and took the money and bought a washer and dryer because they didn't want to go to the laundromat, all the
Hmm.
time. And then they lived on my grandparents' property for a few years, and then we got a house, or they got a house. I wasn't around yet. If I was applying those lessons to today, I just think what I like about the tiny home is that, unlike an apartment, I can actually pour money into this, and in some ways, I have equity or an asset, right? Like, I can't
Yes.
sell my lease on my apartment, right? I can't take it with me across the country, but in this tiny home, I have something that I could technically sell to somebody else, or leave in place in case I need to make a career move or downsize due to a recession or whatever. So I like this from that standpoint, from a financial standpoint. This makes a lot of sense. Instead of renting and paying these exorbitant rents, by the way, I am building equity, or just building an asset that I can use in a number of different ways. So I like that. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you get like a little plot of land for it, put it on
Mhm.
there, landscape, make it nice. It's just an actual like little home. You can sell that, you can rent it out. Like it's a good purchase to make, unlike living in an apartment, which is just draining you. Like you get nothing out of that. You know what I mean?
And you get bad neighbors.
You get bad neighbors. This you can have no neighbors. If you get bad neighbors, you
Hey,
can literally just go. You can
hey,
move.
and I know, you always have that neighbor on top of you, right? Now, the newer apartments won't have this, but the older apartments, you got the neighbors on top who you can hear them walking around.
Oh, well, here's the thing. Like, people can't afford the new apartments, so everybody's got the neighbors.
You
Everybody's
know,
in the old
I
apartments in their
hadn't considered
20s.
that. Yeah, I always see the shiny new ones when I'm riding around certain parts of Charlotte. And I'm like, man, those look cool, but I hadn't thought about those are all running for what, 1,500 a month, something like that.
Exactly. They're like they're basically for like bachelors in their 40s. Like
Right.
we can't afford those. Tiny homes all the way. We can't afford those.
Definitely.
So we'll go ahead and move into our takeaways then. For our first one, tiny homes are a viable option. They are very affordable, and you can get some equity out of it, which is a great bonus. Do your research on your state to see if it's tiny home friendly. Figure out what your zoning laws are. You don't want to get in trouble with it. And number three, look at all of your options. Tiny homes are growing in popularity, and there is something for most everyone.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like it. I've actually learned something. I'm glad you took on this topic, because before this, I just associated it with kind of a quirky passing trend. And now I've learned that when I'm working with a younger client, particularly newlyweds, this may be something to throw in the financial plan. So
There
I'm
you
glad
go.
you pursued this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely getting one. I'm telling you. Like, you're going to see me in my little tiny house traveling around. Well,
Right.
thank you. Well, thank you all for listening. To find out more about us and the company, please visit us at www.wilsonwealth.com, on Instagram and Twitter at Wilson Wealth, and on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Wilson Wealth for more information about us and the company. We'll see you guys next week on the Wilson Wealth Show. Bye bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wilson Wealth Show. a thought provoking show about building wealth in the new economy. Each week, members of the Wilson Wealth team and their guests will discuss how to navigate the world of stocks, real estate, and entrepreneurship to help you build wealth in the new economy. Please join us next time on the Wilson Wealth Show.